Hello and welcome to Redesign Your Life Today. I'm your host, Daniel Kobryner, a high energy mental fitness coach, international motivational speaker, and passionate believer that transformation is always possible, no matter your age or your story. This podcast is a space for those, especially over 40, who feel stuck, off track, or disconnected from whom they really are. If you've ever thought there is more in life than that, you are in the right place. It's about radical transformation with your authentic self, and it's about designing a life that doesn't just look good on the outside and feel right on the inside. So thank you for all for being there. Take a deep breath, open your hearts, and step forward. And today, I've got the immense privilege to receive Nick Volinchak. So Nick is a powerful speaker on perseverance and resilience who turned his journey from addiction and homelessness into one of leadership and entrepreneurship. Nick now inspires others to push through self-doubt and discover the strength that comes from life's toughest moments. So very warm welcome to you, Nick. And I only said a few words, but I'd like you now to work us through your story, if possible.
Absolutely. And I appreciate it so much being able to come on here and, we're talking to my people, and it's not just people who want to have hope and understand different ways to cope with the struggles life is inevitably going to throw your way. But I've had to come to the harsh realization now I am in that 40s group. I'm 41 years old. I don't feel it sometimes though. I still feel like a kid collecting sports cards and playing with wrestling figures. It's sometimes I have to look at myself in the mirror and see the graying sides of my head to understand that I'm 41 years old. But it's great. I'm happy to be here. And as for my story, wow, where to start? Well, let's start at the beginning. I lived a normal life for 8 years. And what I consider normal was mother, father, family, everything was the American dream. We did have three kids, not two and a half. We didn't have a picket fence, but everything on the outside in looked like everything was going how it should for a young family. When I was 8 years old, we got back from a trip to Niagara Falls, and my mother got diagnosed with cancer in September of 1992, and it was the diagnosis was immediately that it's over. There's absolutely no hope. Start making preparations, and by October 25th of that year, she passed. And it was obviously a very stunting event in my life. My childhood, that's when I consider my childhood ended. I still did things that other kids did, but I started to ask a lot of big picture questions. Why would God, let stuff like this happen? And because I grew up Catholic, so it was natural to look at that perspective. But I also felt like I owed it to my father to try to help with things. And my dad didn't cope well with it. He was abusive, physically and emotionally. We've made peace with that now. I actually sometimes hate bringing that up, but I do think it's such a vital component to the story. And it shows that people can change, right? He's been able to make peace with me and admit his wrongdoings. And isn't that what it's all about at the end of the day? So as I entered my teenage years, I was still just struggling to figure out who I was. I went to a 12-person Catholic school that closed, transitioned into an almost 300-person upper middle class public school in the Youngstown, Ohio area of America. And I was just always searching for who am I? What's inside of me? What am I here to do? I had a good group of friends, but it was like 8 dudes that we just hung out all the time in the basement. And this was at a time where like American Pie was coming out, Can't Hardly Wait, all these movies that really highlighted what your high school existence should look like. And I looked around me and I said, what I see up there on the screen is not what I see going on around me. And I don't want to leave high school feeling like I didn't get to experience what I was being trained to assume was normal. So to get in with those crowds, I started doing things like drinking and smoking weed, and very quickly my social circle expanded to the point where I had no shortage of places to be Friday and Saturday night, and oftentimes throughout the week. But it's a funny thing when you start using. It's always fun and games, and you're the life of the party. And one day you wake up and you're like, man, I can't get out of this bed without doing something to get me out of this bed. And so, probably by the time I was 18, I was finishing high school where I finished top 10% of my class, just completely strung out already. And the next 3 years, up until the point I was 21 years old, it just got worse and worse, where I stole from everyone I knew, did bad things, arrests piled up left and right. And someone who had all the promise in the world, even 5 years earlier, who looked like they were going to be a rocket ship taking off, uh, just ends up on the doorstep of a homeless shelter. And I had, I had all the excuses in the world. And the worst part was everybody was willing to allow me to have excuses. Well, my mother died. My father was abusive. I didn't have a normal family upbringing. When I landed at the rescue mission, there was a man named Frank who let me in the building, and he looked me up and down. And I'm 6'5". I'm a big guy. I'm about 250 now. I'm the size of a wrestler. Well, I was 130 pounds, soaking wet when I ended up at the rescue mission. I was a bag of bones. And he looked me up and down, and he said, how is it that at 21 years old, from a place like Canfield, you ended up in a homeless shelter? And I don't know what it was about how he said it, when he said it, what was going on around me, but I had this epiphany where I just finally looked inward and said, my goodness, you've been the problem this whole time. It hasn't been every little thing that happened to you. It was an accumulation of bad decisions you made over and over and over and over again. And really, it was at that point that I decided, listen, I'm 21 years old. My fate hasn't been cast into stone yet. I need to do something to change what I'm doing. And so I started my journey of recovery there.
Wow, what a powerful story, Nick. What a powerful story. So can you tell us about this recovery journey now? How did it go? What did you do? What did you change versus what you were doing before?
It's you effectively, at least in the short term, have to change everything about almost who you are and what you were doing. So, listen, I got lucky, and this sounds weird. I got lucky that all my friends cut me out of their lives anyway. So, I didn't have that option to go knocking back on the door and say, let me back in. I want to come play again. So, I was really able to start from a completely blank slate. And at first, it was really easy because I was so grateful and thankful that I wasn't having to steal food to eat anymore, that I wasn't having to try to steal gas to be able to drive around because I was living in my car. And so that kind of wears off though. And I remember there being just a really stupid little incident where I was watching college football, I think, and I didn't even like college football at the time like I do now, on a Saturday morning. And someone came in and said, hey, we need you to do this. And I was just like, I don't, I want to do what I want to do right now. And that was me kind of falling back into an old behavior. But I noticed it real quick. And I said, well, if I do that now, I'm going to find more opportunities to do that in. And before long, I'm going to find myself back where I started from. And so it was a lesson to me, first and foremost, about how important inner dialogue is, and not just recognizing what is going on within yourself, but honestly, I don't know if there's a better word than like having the courage to stand up to yourself, because it's so easy to let your mind just decide this is what we're going to do and be like, well, that requires no resistance and thus no work, so I'm just going to do that. And so it did take like an entire shift of mind. I had to really work hard every single day. And as I've gotten older, I think the complicated thing is finding out that I have addictions. I have addictive personalities. And as we talked about kind of pre-podcast, even if it's a venture like this where I want to spread my message and do speaking engagements and do podcasts and things like that, when I started looking for podcasts to appear on, it was just like boom, 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 boom. And I had to slow myself down and say, this is something you deem as being positive because you're able to send a message that's helpful to other people. But this is damaging to your overall well being because you're just taking those traits you had as an addict and attaching them to something that is good for now, but can very quickly turn negative if you allow it to consume your life. So I do think it really is a situation where I've had to have honest conversations with myself, really look myself in the mirror and say, you're not done growing yet. You still have a long way to go. And for me, that kind of powers me. It powers me through my day, knowing that I can still make improvements and there's still a lot of work that I have to do on myself.
Wow, this is so powerful. And you see, you said something now, Nick. I'm just going to pick on that. Is that podcast? You wanted to do that, but very often it kind of became like an addiction. So what happens is, and this is, we were just talking about these saboteurs which we have in our mind, which are these little voices. Very often it starts with a good thing. Oh yeah, we want to have a message. We want to pass on a message. And this is great. The issue is that when we start to abuse and overuse these powers, and when all of a sudden it becomes about numbers, it becomes about this, and when we forget about the essence of what it is. How
It's
does
so
this
powerful.
resonate with you?
You're right. Yeah, because again, this isn't all I'm doing. I'm not independently wealthy to the point where I can just decide, hey, I'm doing podcasting and trying to become a public speaker, and I have funding set aside while I'm building that persona up to allow myself and my family to live. My wife and I run a marketing company together. I have everyday obligations, not just to the company, but to clients that I still have to do, not to mention the fact that I still have other hobbies, not to mention the fact, first and foremost, above everything else, I have a wife and a kid, and I need to make sure their needs when it comes to me and my time are met. And the more stuff you put on your plate, it begins to overflow. And sometimes if you let it go out of control, you're not able to pick what elements get left in the wayside. A lot of people I talk to are high achieving people who deal with I've made it on the outside, but I feel dead on the inside. I have imposter syndrome. A lot of times what it comes down to is putting the focus and emphasis on the wrong things. And a lot of times you look and you see these powerful people, the first thing that they lose is their family because they always feel like they have time to make it up, but you don't. When your family starts to feel disconnected from you, it doesn't take long before they feel like they have to have the needs met somewhere or somehow else. So it's something that weighs on my mind, and I think about it constantly. And it has to be family first. It really does. And that's one of the big norms I'm trying to break amongst the crowd that I really feel like I could speak to is that everything else has to come secondary to what's going on in your personal life.
Absolutely. And, thank you very much for bringing this. It resonates with me. And perhaps I would go a little further. I like the word, which is taking a holistic approach. Because you said there's family, but really, for me, I mean, happiness, it's at all levels. I mean, first, physically, if we are not well physically, nothing's happened. We can't be good with others. But then it's as well about family. It's about of course work, but it's as well about relationships. It's as well about spirituality. All this, I think, there needs to be a balance in life. And what's your take on that, Nick?
Well, addicts are typically not good at balance. So
Okay. Uh-huh.
that's the reality is because when you're an addict, you spend a disproportionate amount of your time focused on the activities that go into fueling your addiction. Again, most people who are addicts don't have a money tree they just go pick. These are some of the, I did a podcast a while back by myself about how there are so many traits that drug addicts have that are perceived to be negative, but if you flipped them into the context of how you could use it as a business person, would be desirable traits that
Mhm.
many CEOs have, the best salespeople have, because we have to go out, we have to figure out who is our mark for the day? How are we going to get our money? How are we going to work through that situation so that we come out unscathed and are able to feed our addiction once we have the means to feed our addiction? And so that balance becomes difficult. And like I said, I have a lot of friends inevitably who are addicts, and we see it in our lives each and every day where we still have to fight hard to bring ourselves back to the center and really evaluate the balance in our lives, because if gone unchecked, we will find something that consumes us. And again, it can be something that is outwardly perceived as good, but can have terrible repercussions on the relationships we're trying to build around us.
Yes, absolutely. And I have a question for you. What is for you the importance and the challenge in taking on new habits in your life?
It's definitely a challenge. So I love, like I said, I love growing. And part of growing is finding new things and new areas of interest. For me, as an addict, and I have had to stop using the term recovered addict. I'm a recovered drug addict, but addiction is still something I deal with on a day-to-day basis because it's there within, I don't, physiologically, there's probably something in me that leads me to be disposed to the habits and the way I deal with them. So like I said, internal dialogue is so important, and a lot of times it is an element of I always start out of control, and it's recognizing this and being really willing to quickly rein in the habit to something that feels more purposeful and controllable. Um, there are so few things we think we can control more than we actually can. That is a very common misconception in life. But I try to put as much under my control as I possibly can, and then working with my wife honestly, and just kind of being like, you know who I am, you see what I'm starting to do, be willing to be that checks and balances to say, hey kid, you're going too far, you got to slow it down.
Yes. And this brings me to a point, Nick, because you said obviously you are very well surrounded by with your wife. What do you recommend to people listening to us, and particularly people who have addictions, about accountability and about the people you surround yourself with? What's your
Yeah,
advice?
it's the most important thing that's going to happen. You mentioned the the physical. And I'm a firm believer of garbage in, garbage out, right? So if you surround yourself with people who are going nowhere and have negative habits and have a bad viewpoint on life, misery loves company, and you're going to fall right into that sinkhole with them. So it's important, and it's really the most important thing is understanding how truly special our life is. And what I mean by that is there are over 8 billion people, I think, at this point on the face of this earth, and no two people are wired the exact same way, meaning everyone, even though they might suffer from the same problem, how they have to handle it is completely different than the next person. For instance, I'm California sober. What that means is I can smoke weed for my anxiety, and that's really how I use it. I don't use it recreationally. Sometimes I find myself in these very don't want to leave the house because I just have social anxiety from having so many bad experiences over years of dealing with people. And then NA and AA, when I attended those meetings, all I found were new people to get drunk and high with. But there are people who are 50, 60 years sober that have to go to those meetings and it works for them. So what works for one person doesn't work for another. I talk to someone at 8 a.m. every Monday morning, And most of the time, it is very open ended. And I get on the phone with them or I get on Zoom and I just talk. Whatever is going on in my life, it might be the smallest little thing, but for me, having that release and just getting what's inside me out, I almost always pull one or two things that I either notice I have to change about myself. I'm able to pat myself on the back and say, hey, we identified this like 3 months ago that this was a problem area, and you're very clearly making progress on it. And it shouldn't just be, I'm always working to get better. Sometimes you have to stop and be willing to say, hey, congratulations, you are moving ahead in some of these areas and not just try to continue moving on. Sometimes the affirmation we need most is from ourselves. So there's no question surrounding yourself with a good group of people and knowing what your internal and external needs are going to be the major difference between what keeps you moving forward in life and what causes you to fall back to where you were.
Yes, you see, something resonated. I mean, everything resonates with me, Nick. But the fact of celebrating every little victory, what we've done, it's so important because we forget. Some people think, oh, it's got a big goal. If not, it's not worth celebrating. No, it's really being and practicing gratitude, being grateful for what we have, for the people around us, for the fact that we are alive, for the beautiful weather around us, for the nature. When we start, and there's a concept which really it's dear to my heart is mindfulness, being mindful every moment. And it's really about preventing our mind to drift and to come back there. And when the more we do that, and it takes time, it takes practice, the more we appreciate life, because life, it's not about beating ourselves up. This is the famous judge, which we all have. But it's not us. It's a little voice which is there where we judge ourselves. We are very harsh. We judge others. We judge circumstances. When we understand that we can deal with that, we can soften it. This is really when we can change so many things in our life.
Yeah, I mean, it's immensely powerful hearing that because I think the same way you do. I'm just sometimes not able to articulate how you just made the point. So that kind of affirmation, that hearing someone else say what you think and knowing that there's other people that view the world from the same perspective as you do and want to see the same holistic good for the world. In America right now, and that's all I can speak to, we force more division than ever. We don't have communication on the things we need to. We don't talk about race, we don't talk about religion, we don't talk about politics. We talk a lot about sex right now, but for a while that was taboo too. And we thought it was in an effort to make sure we hold relationships together. Well, all it did was create echo chambers to where people grew up not hearing the other side of the coin and thus assuming the feelings they had, the opinions they had were actually fact. And when you approach life in any position from that, you can't get talked out of it because if I have to face the fact that what I feel and what I believe is not right, that damages my whole personality in the core. Surely I'm not that stupid that I could possibly fall into that trap and believe things that aren't true. So we haven't talked as a country. And when we vote very selfishly. How is this going to help me and my family? Well, brothers and sisters, I'm here to tell you, we don't survive by self. We survive by community. And we should be looking at what's best for everyone around us, not just the people under our own roof.
Well, thank you so much for outlining this point. And just would like to share this little thing is that, I used to be in international sales. I ran some companies, and a few years back, I had this calling to become a mental fitness coach. Why? Because I listened to coaches talking, and I realized that I had done this all my life without even knowing that. It's really wanting others, to get the best out of themselves is doing something which is above myself. So And afterwards, the more I, practiced it, I realized that one of the keys of happiness is to do things for others without expectations. Really, because we want to do that. We want to help. We want to be of service. We want to care. We want to love. And when we do that, all of a sudden things become so much easier. Because very often people think, oh, I do this if you do that. No, life is not about that. It's about, and the more you embrace that, and the more you let this other side, which is your ego, which is selfishness, etc., you let it on the side and you become really the authentic version of yourself. Life becomes very easy and appeased because there's this thing that happiness never comes from outside. It's not going to come from a relationship. It's not going to come from a job. It's not going to come from circumstances. We are the ones who can build our happiness. We increase our vibrations and our energy and our frequency. And when we do that, this is when we attract other people, other circumstances, other situations. How does it resonate with you, Nick?
Yeah, you're speaking to the choir, and I like to look at my own experiences and exactly what you were talking about, even maybe 10 years ago, as I was coming out, because and I worked at the rescue mission for 10 years after I lived there. And it should be no shock to anyone that I didn't become a wealthy man working at a homeless shelter. And I quickly realized that the shelter was no longer meeting my economic, physical, mental, and quite frankly, spiritual needs. And so I had started going to college and I had got an internship that turned into a full-time position. And so I had started to make money. And money is a funny thing because when you don't have any of it, it's all you think about. And then initially, when you start to get it, you see all of the happiness it can provide, but the happiness really just provides you access to more things, right? And so I was never able to buy a Louis Vuitton belt. Well, now I can go to the store and waste $800. And listen, Louis, I love you. Okay. I'm not trying to talk down on your products. I have a Louis Vuitton belt. It's one of my prized possessions. I could buy it. But then you get home and you're like, huh, I don't feel any different after I spent all of that money. It's because when you focus on profit over purpose, you're not really satisfying the needs, you're satisfying your wants. You're in the moment right now. This is the thing I want to do, but it doesn't really change what's going on inside. And for me, it became when I left the mission, I had a hole in me because every day I got to talk to people who were like me when I got to the mission. And I was able to share my story and share the tips and tricks and tools that I had in my toolbox to help them get through life and to manage life in a more um, reasonable fashion. And as I went further and further away from doing that with people, the hole got bigger and bigger. And I was finally able to sit down and recognize in myself, oh, you've been so focused on profit that you have lost what your purpose actually is in this world. And so that's why I circled back around and said, "Hey, I've wanted to do this forever, but it was always move the goalpost here, move the goalpost there." And finally, I just had to sit and say, I'm never going to have any satisfaction. I'm never going to start to feel whole again until I do the thing that I'm here to do.
And this is so powerful. And see, I really love your story, Nick. And when you were in this refuge, you said, yeah? Oh, how was it called? Sorry,
The
sometimes the
rescue
word,
mission,
yeah, a rescue mission. Yes, exactly. Yeah. And, when you take a step back, you think, how fortunate you were to have this. It was there, it was to welcome you. Imagine if it hadn't been there. So you see, afterwards, when you take a step back, you kind of owe it to yourself to give back to society and to think, wow, I had the chance at 21 to turn my life around. And I really want to help others to do the same. And it comes from my heart. It's got nothing to do with anything else. And because you see, this question of purpose there, you talked about could be a car, a belt, or anything. Very often, this is like sometimes about validation, it's about status, but Does it come from inside? Not really. It comes from outside. It's like people, they have a car and the neighbor has another car and they want another car and another house. And people are never happy because the purpose is not there. It's really kind of doing something for which you are being so grateful and where there's this purpose and this drives you. You are in the morning and you are very happy to go to the rescue mission and to help people because you know that even a little change is going to make a transformation in their lives.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. And that's what has kind of powered me to take this step to make sure that I'm getting my story out there and trying to find like-minded people like yourself where we could share and have a conversation and open up our audiences to a different perspective or a reinforcement of something that helps them to live their lives in a better way. This world has so many takers, so many people that just want to pillage the resources around them. We need people who want to give because, believe it or not, giving is contagious, right? When you help that person, just like somebody helped me, my disposition is to sit here and think, I grew up fortunate to where I never had to worry about food in my mouth. I never had to worry about a roof over my head. I made bad decisions to get myself to the point where I had to worry about those things, and people helped me. So, what kind of hypocrite would I be if I just took all of that and didn't give any of it back? And there is no you stop at this point because, oh, you worked at the rescue mission for 10 years. That's enough. Well, I'm going to be alive. I've been alive longer than those 10 years. So for every day that I'm alive, I need to be giving something good out into the universe to help somebody else.
Well, exactly. And see, when we talk about giving, of course, I'm exactly on the same wavelength as where you are, but I mean, it can be money, it can be your time, just a smile. You know, you smile to somebody who is, or just have a few words, and it can make a person's day. So I have to say, Nick, this conversation has been absolutely fantastic, and it could have gone on for hours, and
Forever.
probably we have another one. But I have a question for you. For our audience there, which I'm sure loved what you had to say, if you were to bring up like three takeaways that people should get from this conversation, what would it be?
Sure, it's never too late to get your house on straight, meaning you could be 65 or 70 years old. You're not too far gone that you cannot get your stuff in order and move on to be the best version of yourself that you want to be. Number two, giving is contagious and helping other people, seeing how what you did, no matter how little or how big the act is, can have an impact on a person's life is enough to keep me going every day to try to have those interactions with people that will leave them in a better place. And number three, ultimately, find your tribe. Put the people around you that are going to help you get to the next level. I hear a lot of times there's a slogan like, if you're the smartest guy in the room, it's time to leave the room. And I've
Mhm.
heard that again and again and again. And I'm going to tell you what, I think that's the most selfish, self serving phrase I have ever heard. It highlights the audacity, the ego, the id that lives within us to satisfy ourselves and forget everyone else. What about elevating the room that you're in so that when you leave, it's not a brain drain? Why don't you want to bring those people with you? So that's what it's really all about, is find a group of people who think like you do and have good aspirations for where we're trying to go as a community and a society.
It's beautiful. I cannot agree more than that what you said. I mean, the sense of community, of belonging, of helping others, of supporting each other. This is marvelous. And Nick, when people want to find you, want to perhaps work with you, what's the best way for them to contact you?
So the logical way would be a website that is my name. But
Yes.
my name is long and complicated. So I just used themicroshift.com. We didn't really get to talk about it, but microshifts are kind of my view on the little things in life that end up playing a huge part. My conversation with Frank was a microshift in me. People would look, "Oh, your mom died. That's what it turned your life. You ended up at the rescue mission. That ends up, yes, obviously those big, huge events had a massive impact in my life, but those little conversations had just as much impact on how I decided to move forward. So I call my movement the Microshift Project. So my website is themicroshift.com. I'm on LinkedIn at Nicholas Vlinchak. I think you'll probably see it at the bottom of the screen at some point. On Twitter and Instagram at Nick from CWE, and on YouTube at the Microshift. And I think that's it for a while. I might add TikTok, but I'm busy. It's hard to keep up with all these things, and who knows what's going to be legal here one day versus the next.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. And obviously, for all our listeners who listen in playback, all your details will be featured, on the YouTube. So thank you so much, Nick. It's been absolutely wonderful to have you as a guest, and thank you very much for our listeners. I'm sure you get a lot out of this, and as Nick said, it's never too late in your life to make a transformation. Surround yourself with the right people, and everything is possible. Thank you, everyone, and see you all in the next episode.